thankful for everyone that has showed up tonight to listen to the Word of God. And we're going to do a couple songs for you and hope that you like them. And it goes like this. Hold on a little longer, help is on the way. Hold on a little longer, help is on the way. Hold on a little longer, holy words obey. Hold on a little longer, help is on the way. Walking down my road to the home, heavy lady, trying to bear a load. Two soldiers, wounded, battle of a load. Hold on a little longer, help is on the way. Hold on a little longer, help is on the way. Hold on a little longer, you'll find strength today. Walk on a little further, holy words obey. Hold on a little longer, help is on the way. Any moment you're gonna look up, see through your tears. Any second you're gonna realize holy presence near. You're gonna witness all the sorrow of the enemy fall down. Hold on a little longer, your victory bound. Hold on a little longer, help is on the way. Hold on a little longer, you'll find strength today. Walk on a little further, holy words obey. Hold on a little longer, help is on the way. Hold on a little longer, help is on the way. We do this one in church, but I do it differently. You ready? Oh, wait a minute. Splendid of a king, clothed in majesty, let all the earth rejoice. He wrapped himself in light, and darkness tried to hide, and trembled at his voice. How great is our God! Sing with me. Ages to ages stand. Time is in his hand, beginning and end. The God hath three is one, Father, Spirit, and the Son, the Lion and the Lamb. Well, how great is our God? Sing with me, how great is our God? Sing with me, how great. Oh, how great's our God. Well, sing with me, how great is our God. Sing with me, how great is our God. Sing with me, how great. Oh, how great's our God.
A little bit different tonight, isn't it? I'm a little behind, aren't I? Usually I got my microphone already on and have my stuff up here. But that's okay. Do what? No, ma'am. That's why I say it is okay. Something that y'all may not know about me, I'll just throw it out there real quick, is I always got along with older people, older than me. Even growing up, I was with older people. I don't know. I didn't hear that. What'd she say? I should have known that was you, Miss Kathy, saying that. But the point is, even today, I still get along with older people. I never worked it out that way. That's just how it went. So, as you can see, I enjoyed watching Miss Virginia keep time with that, with her foot on the drum. And so I can tell you today with older people, because I'm 51, so the ones that's older than me, today it's more like today's time is when they speak, they're not trying to hide anything. There's no motive behind their words. They are just what they are. And that's what I enjoy the most of. And one day, I'll be able to be there, so when I say it, people can look past me when I say something as well. They can say, yeah. All right, so we're going to do a little something different tonight than what we normally do. We're going to try this and see how it works out. Well, before we do that, keep Miss Sheena and her family in your prayers, because they called the family in about her brother. And also Miss Hetty Mapp's brother, he did pass, right? So y'all keep them in your prayers as well, along with all the ones on the prayer list, of course. But those two I heard tonight about, so I wanted to make sure I brought them before us. And before we get started, let's open up in prayer. Lord, we thank you for another day of life, and we thank you for your many blessings. Watch over us and keep us safe, and help us to take your word and to apply it to our lives. These things we ask in your name. Amen. So what we're going to try to do different tonight is, instead of 3 and 4 point outline, we're going to start a study in Ecclesiastes. And what we don't finish tonight, which I'm going to tell you we're not going to finish, will continue next Wednesday as well. Now, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but when you do a 3-point outline, or if it's a 5-point outline, whatever, that goes much easier than you doing a study on a book. Because once you get into it, you run down all these different avenues, and then at the same time, you worry to make sure that you get the information accurate in order to make sure that you convey it accurately as well. So as I started into it, I said, maybe I should have went with the 3-point outline like I normally go with. But it's too late for that because I'd already got into it. So we're going to try it and see how it goes. Hopefully I don't bore you with it. But there's several things we need that we'll see in Ecclesiastes that's much different than anything else that you will see in the Bible. But before I get into that, I want to tell you about a story. This is a 24-year-old boy or young man, and he's riding on a train and he's looking out the window and he shouts to his daddy. His daddy's sitting there with him. Look, the trees are going behind. And Dad smiled. And a young couple sitting nearby looked at the 24-year-old's childish behavior with pity. And suddenly, again, he hollered out, Dad, look at the clouds. They're running with us. And the couple couldn't resist, so they said to the dad, why don't you take your son to a good doctor? And the dad smiled very patiently, and he said, we just got out of the hospital, and my son was blind at birth. He just got his eyes today. So the point in this is every single person on the planet has a story. We all have stories that we can tell. Some of us don't tell them, but the ones that do, if we listen, we can learn from those stories. And instead of being so quick to judge, because that's what the young couple was doing, was judging the young man when they didn't realize he had never been able to see before. So they thought it was childish, of course, to be excited over the trees and the clouds. I'd like to say that we need not be so quick to judge each other and the people that we surround on a daily basis, because we don't know what they're going through. We don't know what life they have. And like Elvis said, until you walk a mile in my shoes, you don't know. So until you do, the best thing to do is just be nice, because that goes much further. Because like I said before, we all have stories. And I enjoy sitting with older people and listen to their stories, because when they tell them, they don't hold back. They let them out. Now with Solomon, the reason I bring this story up is because Solomon is going to be able to be easily judged in Ecclesiastes when we hear about what's going on in the first chapter. But we don't know his entire life. We only know what's being depicted in the Bible. So just remember, let's not be so quick to judge. The name Ecclesiastes, and we're going to do a little introduction before we just dive into the verses, but the name of Ecclesiastes is translated from the Hebrew word. I'm not going to try to pronounce the Hebrew word, but it means one who convenes an assembly. And they also throw in there sometimes preacher and philosopher. We're going to use the word philosopher because when we dig into the first chapter, we can misunderstand or very quickly misunderstand where he's coming from when we use the word preacher, because there's several contradictions in Ecclesiastes that tie with the Bible. So then you'll say, I thought there's no contradictions in the Bible. There's not. There's not any contradictions in the Bible. But what atheists like to do is use Ecclesiastes to fuel their fire because of what Solomon is doing in Ecclesiastes. So remember, Ecclesiastes, if you don't know, this is going to be from a human perspective apart from God. This is what Solomon is doing. As I go, you'll figure out what I'm talking about. This is a human apart from God doing sinful things to seek fulfillment only to find emptiness without God. Now, we already know the answer to what the question he's posing here when we get to it. We already know that. Common sense is going to tell us, well, I already know that. Yes, we do. But as we dive into it a little deeper, we'll see for sure, without a doubt, apart from God, you'll always be empty. And remember, we don't want to judge him because we're not walking in his shoes. Now, who wrote the book? Obviously, King Solomon wrote the book. And according to what I looked up, somewhere between 970 and 931 BC, that was his reign. King Solomon was King David's son, which was the greatest king of Israel. And it's believed that he wrote this book towards the end of his life, looking back and taking inventory of his life. His desire is to pass his wisdom down to us. And that's the whole point of us diving a little deeper into Ecclesiastes, is so that we can learn from his wisdom. And like I said before, common sense is going to prevail in this. But it's still good to see that we're talking to the wisest man that ever lived in Ecclesiastes. He had 5 experiments that he's doing in Ecclesiastes. And remember, all of these are humanistic views to see if he can find happiness or peace by indulging into these 5 things. Some scholars call it the book of foolishness because of what he dives into or indulges into. The phrase under the sun is said 29 times in Ecclesiastes. And the word vanity occurs 37 times in the book of Ecclesiastes. Another phrase that recurs many times is, I said in my heart. So remember those 3 things. I said in my heart, under the sun, and vanity. Another phrase, that is the other phrase. Solomon embarks on a grand experiment to discover if there is any purpose to life apart from God. He refers to that life as under the sun. So this is not how we're taught to live. We're taught to focus on things above, and Solomon is focusing on things below. That is why he referenced under the sun. Now we know this is how the majority of the world lives. They live for self, live for self-indulgent, live for what we can get out of it. Never really finding the real joy and peace that will fill your heart until they release their desires and focus on God's desires for their life. We know that. But how many times, from the point that we knew it, how many times before that did we indulge into things thinking it was going to make us happy? And I'd have to say, even after you become to know Christ, sometimes you'll still veer down that path of indulging into something that you think is going to make you happy. For an example, I want a new car. You get that new car. After you get the new car, how long does that feeling last? Not very long. And then you're on to the next thing. Or I want to build a new house. You build a new house. After you get in there, how long does that last? not very long, I want to get a promotion at my job. You get that promotion. After you obtain these things, the feeling and emotions does not last long at all. We all know this because we have experienced it at some point in time, whether when we were a child or even when we were an adult. The only joy and peace we'll ever get out of life is having a relationship with Jesus Christ. That's the only possible way you'll feel that emptiness and that void in your heart. Solomon is wanting to do these experiments to prove that that is the case. And there again, I have to say, so we're not misunderstood before we start into the scripture, this is being apart from God, what he's doing. He had 5 things, and this is how I categorize these things. You can read it, and you may categorize it different. Experiment number 1 was to find happiness and wisdom. Experiment number 2 was to find happiness and pleasure. Experiment number 3 was to find happiness in work. Experiment number 4 was to find happiness in wealth. And experience number 5 was to find happiness in women. That's the 5 things that he indulges into on these experiments. Solomon also composed 3,000 proverbs and 1,005 songs. Now, we'll go ahead and look at Ecclesiastes, and we'll start now. That was the introduction to start into Ecclesiastes. I am going to be in the English Standard Version. That's the version I'll be reading out of. The very first verse, the words of a preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Now, we pretty much know what that means. Not much to expound on upon that. Verse number 2, vanity of all vanities, says the preacher, vanity of all vanities. All is vanity. Now, we can go ahead and close up the Bible because we already know the conclusion. It's all vanity. With us, we will find the points and investigate, figure out what the problem is, and then we tell you what the conclusion is. But with Solomon, he goes ahead and tells us the conclusion right off the bat. It's all vanity. Another word for vanity is it's all emptiness. Everything that he's getting ready to do, when you get to the end, you got nothing. Zero, zilcho. Even though you think that's what you want in life. And here's the great thing about it. He's speaking from experience. He's not speaking from not knowing. He's also the wisest man on earth. He is speaking from experience, just like we don't want to hear from someone that hasn't been through it before. Because if they hadn't been through it, how do they know? When we are going through something, we'll talk to somebody about how can I do this? And they'll tell us, we'll get a million different opinions of what you should do and how you should do it. And by the time you get through, you'll be all wrapped up and don't know which way to go. But Solomon has went through it, and he's experienced it, and that's what he's telling us on his conclusion. All is empty. But yet, he still did these 5 experiments to prove it. Verse 3, what does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? Remember, under the sun, we're apart from God. It's from a humanistic standpoint. And we work. What do we work for? Well, first of all, we know the Bible tells us if you don't work, you don't eat, right? So we know we work to eat, to keep the lights on, to do all the things that we need to do in life. To stay stable in life, you have to work. But what Solomon is saying here, that if work is all you do for your self-gain, then it's going to become emptiness when you get to the end. That's what he's saying in this verse. Verse number 4, a generation goes and a generation comes. Now, the best way I can describe that is when we're gone, we have another generation coming behind us. When that generation is gone, there's another generation that comes behind us. How many of us in this room know about our great-grandfather, great-grandmother, and before them and before them? I can tell you, I can go back as far as my grandmother and my granddad, and some of that I have forgotten. So the point Solomon's trying to make here is the world's going to keep going either way, and those people are going to be forgotten eventually, and then the next generation comes. That's what he's saying. Verse number 5, the sun rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it rises. So every day, until the earth ends, the sun is rising, the sun's going down. It's going to be the same thing. These are basic things that we already know, but the emphasis is that on these basic, essential things, these things are going to continue no matter what we're doing here on earth, apart from God, is what he's standing. So we got to keep that in mind, apart from God. Verse number 6, the wind blows to the south and goes around to the north. Around and around goes the wind. And on its circuits, the wind returns. Same thing with the sun. You got wind that's going this way, that way. It's doing this. It's going to be a constant. That's another constant that we're going to have here on earth is wind. It's a constant, just like the sun. Now, verse 7 is somewhat interesting to me. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. We know the reason for that, the water cycle. We know the water goes up, evaporates, circulates back, comes back down, and it's a continuous cycle. But remember, Solomon is the wisest man on earth. And for him to notice, there's things that they knew back then that people didn't know back then. And as I get further down this list, you'll see where I'm coming from. And to finish verse 7, to the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. Verse number 8, all things are full of weariness, a man cannot utter it. How many of us has got so weary we didn't even know what to do or what to say when we're in that predicament? Sometimes I don't even know what to pray for when I get in a predicament to where I don't know what to do, or I get overwhelmed with life. I don't know even what to pray for. And if I'm apart from God, then who would I even talk to that would soothe myself and my soul to get me through that predicament? And what he's saying is, when you're apart from God and you have that weariness, what hope do you have? You don't have any hope because you're apart from God. The eye is not satisfied. This is going to be a good one that we all can relate to. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. We're never satisfied. Never are we satisfied. Why are we not ever satisfied? Because we're sinful and we live in a sinful world. And because of that sinful nature, that's why we're never satisfied. We always want more, don't we? I know everybody in this room, whether you say it or not or admit it, there's some point in time in your life where you wanted more than what you got now. And after you get it, whether it's monetary gain or in your job or whatever it is, after you get it, you still want more. It doesn't matter. You still want more. It's human nature. But when it becomes that's all you want and you're apart from God, then that's where the problem comes in. And that's what Solomon is saying. We always want more. Always. No matter how much we got. This is a man, I'm getting ready to jump ahead only because it just popped in my head. This is a man that's, based on what I studied, he was also the richest man at that time. And his value at that time was $2.2 trillion. That was his value at that time. He reigned for 40 years. You're probably going to hear this again because I'm going past my notes right now. But it's a good time to use it. We're going to use it again. He reigned for 40 years, and each year he was brought 25 tons of gold. So he had all the resources to do these experiments. Kind of like I don't know, but I know I've seen movies, or it wouldn't be in my head right now. Kind of like a rich guy that has nothing else to do but play around with the experience. He has all the resources. He can do whatever he wants. He can get whatever he wants whenever he wants it. That's Solomon. That's where he's at. He can do whatever, however, get as much as he wants whenever he wants it. He's went through all the experiences, and he knows in the end, in the very second verse of Ecclesiastes, it's all vanity. Verse number 9, what has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done, and there is nothing new under the sun. Okay, so we could argue that point. Let's say there's nothing new under the sun. Well, there's planes. Yeah, you could argue that. But how about looking at it from this perspective? The birds were flying before the planes were. So the basic essential is flight was going on before man figured out how to get a plane in the air. And what he's saying is the basic things that we know is already there. Let's use the internet for an example. The internet is only, and you may disagree with me, but the internet is only another form of communication. We were already communicating before the internet was anywhere around. But the basic form of communicating was already here under the sun. Now, I have to admit, YouTube helps me out a whole lot. When I have to look something up or don't know how to repair something, I look up YouTube and I say, oh, I'm a refrigerator repairman now. I can handle that. I'll order that part. And if we didn't have the internet, then we'd have to go to a refrigerator repairman and learn how to do it. But the same basic thing is still there, communication. That's what he's saying. There's nothing new under the sun. And there'll never be nothing new under the sun. And let me say this, history repeats itself over and over again. Verse number 10. Is there a thing of which it is said, see, this is new? And we just answered that, and the answer is no, but he goes on to say, it has been already in the ages before us. And it has. It's already there. Verse 11, there is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after. the vanity of wisdom. Look at verse 12. I, the preacher, have been king. We can also put, here's where we could get misunderstood very quickly if we don't know the context. Instead of saying the word preacher, we could put also philosopher here, because he is speaking about things apart from God. You know, right off the bat, somebody doesn't know any better, they see the word preacher, they're going to say, oh, a preacher's saying that. That's not the case in this context. There are no contradictions in the Bible. There are people who take it out of context and use it to justify their own point. So verse 12, I, the philosopher, have been king over Israel and Jerusalem, and I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. Now we know what he's doing, because that's what he said he's doing. Remember in verse 2, he tells us the conclusion right off the bat. Now he's telling us, here's what I'm doing. I'm applying my heart to seek, and heart is your mind too. He's applying his heart, his mind, everything. To seek, to search out by wisdom, and we said one of the 5 things is wisdom. By wisdom, all that's done under heaven. Now, if you can move just for a minute to 1 Kings chapter 4, verse 29. And if you don't, I'll read it. 1 Kings 4:29. And God gave Solomon wisdom and understanding beyond measure. So where did he get the wisdom from? He got it from God. And it was beyond measure, far beyond anybody else there at that time on earth. He breadeth a mind like the sand on the seashore. That means he was full of wisdom. He had plenty of wisdom, much beyond anybody else living at that time. Verse 30, so that Solomon's wisdom surpassed the wisdom of all the people of the east and all the wisdom of Egypt as well. That's how we know he's the wisest man. And who gave it to him? God gave him the wisdom. For he was wiser than all other men. Wiser than, well, I'm going to skip over those pieces because I want to get down to verse 32. Verse 32, he also spoke 3,000 proverbs, which we said earlier. And his songs were 1,005. So you know where I got my information. I got it out of the Bible. Verse 33, he spoke of trees, from the cedar that's in Lebanon to the hyssop that grows out of the wall. He spoke also of beasts and of birds and of reptiles and of fish, and people of all nations came to hear the wisdom of Solomon, and from all the kings of the earth who had heard of his wisdom. He spoke a lot about nature. And when I say nature, I'm talking about he got in depth about nature, not just speaking of certain animal-like creatures that were there. He got in depth on what they did, what they do, how they live. He was the wisest man. And people came all over to listen to him. You would think, we would think, that if he's the wisest guy around, how come he had to do these 5 things to figure out that apart from God, there's no emptiness? I can't answer that. I just know he did them. And we know from what he's doing, when he gets to the end, it's empty. Everything's empty. Now, let me stop there for a minute because I just had a thought. That's scary when I have a thought in the middle of something because you never know what I may say. But this is how I can relate this sometimes when I think about we know what we're supposed to do, but we don't always do it. And sometimes we still go down those paths that we shouldn't go down, even though we know not to go down them. And so my example for that is even though he is passing this wisdom down to us and we know about it, but yet sometimes we don't follow it, I can equate that to my kids. I tell them, look, if you do this, here's what's going to happen. But they don't listen. They still want to find out for themselves, and sometimes you just have to let them do it. Because the only way they're going to know is they have to experience it themselves. You're trying to keep them from the heartache. You're trying to keep them from not going that way. You're trying to let them know if you do this, here's what's going to happen. And at some point, you have to let go and just let them do it, because until they experience, what my mama used to say is, he's going to learn the hard way. Until they experience it, you're not going to know, or they're not going to know. And it's the same way with Solomon and with us and people around the world. He tells us what's at the end, what's going to happen, and yet we still sometimes go down those paths. Why is that? You say, well, I ain't answering that. I don't blame you. I can tell you in my own life that sometimes I think I'm smarter than what the Bible tells me. And I know that that's not the case. And so I have to experience it. And then once I experience, okay, dummy, you already knew the outcome. Why did you do that? And like my kids, well, let me back up. Isn't it great to know even when we mess up that we have a loving God that still has his arms stretched wide open waiting for us, no matter the outcome? Will there be circumstances in our life that we'll have to pay the price? Yeah, but he's still there. He's never going to leave us nor forsake us. And if Solomon doing these things apart from God, wouldn't it be a sad day when we didn't have Jesus Christ? It would be a sad day. We wouldn't have any hope. I don't know how people get through life without knowing him. I truly don't. People will say, oh, you use that for a crutch. No, I don't. I don't use it for a crutch. The common sense is the only thing that you can derive to with the correct answer of knowing that that's how we're here on earth, is we're created by a creator. We didn't just happen. That chair was built by somebody. It has a purpose. It didn't just appear. Our body is much more complex than a chair. If somebody would have been sitting right there, they'd have got wet because I just spit. Anyway. And if that was the case, I'd have said you shouldn't have sat right there. But our bodies are so much more complex. I can remember laying in bed as a teenager, looking up at the ceiling and thinking, what is my purpose? Before I ever knew Christ. So it's built in us before you ever know him to search him out and find him. Or someone will send someone to you to give you the word. Either way. But I can remember laying in bed, looking at the ceiling, wondering, what's my purpose and what am I here for? And as a young man, as a teenager, and I don't want to get off in my background because, man, we're already 15 minutes. I usually have done by now, Miguel. Holy smokes. And I still got a little bit more to go, so that's going pretty good. So anyway, well, let me ask you this. Are you bored yet? No. Okay, all right. So I can remember as a teenager, I was looking up at the ceiling trying to figure out my purpose, right? Mama and Daddy, we didn't go to church. We didn't do that. The only time I saw a church house when I was a kid was either family reunions or when the Boy Scouts, we would meet at church. So they didn't talk about things like that. Even I don't know how you guys grew up, but like on the sex talk, I didn't get that growing up either. I didn't know any of that. I had to learn that from other people. I didn't get any of that. They was kind of funny about that kind of stuff. I don't think they knew how to approach it. And today, my way of thinking is you be very blunt and straightforward with your kids. That's what you do. That's what we did with ours. Now, once they get to a certain age, nothing you can do about it. Whatever they're going to do, they're going to do. But you do the best you can. But the reason I said that is because I didn't know a purpose, but I knew I was here, and I knew somebody made me. I knew that. Common sense told me that. And to go back to what we were talking about in the beginning, because I'm running down a rabbit trail because I got thinking about that, is that we are all created by God, and common sense would tell you that somebody made you. You didn't just come from a lot of atoms or energy, and that the true God is Jesus Christ because it's the only thing that fits, and it's the only thing that makes the most sense. I didn't have to have anybody explain that to me. I figured that out once the gospel was told to me. Then once you start learning and you look around, it makes the most sense. What? And then the other thing is that you cannot argue with changed lives. When people change their life from going in this direction to that direction because they come to know Christ, who can argue that point? So, let's go back to where we were at before I went down the rabbit trail. It is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of, we're still in verse 12, and we're in verse 13, and we're reading the second half of it. It is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. Verse 14, I have seen everything that is done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity. There's the word vanity again. And under the sun. And a striving, vanity and a striving after wind. Now, what that means is what a phrase we used to hear all the time, and probably still hear it. It's like a dog chasing his tail. You chase after whatever you want to chase, but by the time you get to the end, you're still just chasing your tail if it's apart from God. All right, I'm on the last page. Are y'all good? Are y'all with me? All right, you want me to keep going or you want me to stop? All right. Verse 15, what is crooked and cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. Solomon even admits with all of his wisdom that was given to him, it is like an endless puzzle that has to be solved and resolved. Isn't life that way sometimes? And if we're apart from God, we'll fall into that trap as well. There again, remember, he's speaking from a human, apart from God standpoint. Verse 16, I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me. And my heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. And I applied my heart to know wisdom. He didn't just want to have wisdom, he wanted to know wisdom. I want to have knowledge of wisdom, is what he's saying. Knowledge is the knowing of something, and wisdom is the doing of the knowledge that they know. Example. You think about, I'm just using this because this is stuff that relates to me. An engine of a car. I know basically how that engine works. But if you told me to break it down and fix it, I don't have the wisdom to do that. But I have the knowledge of knowing the basics of how it works. That's what Solomon is saying. That not only he wants to know that wisdom, he wants to break down that wisdom I know it from a knowledge standpoint, but not from an experience standpoint, a wisdom standpoint. Solomon knows it from a wisdom standpoint because he's experienced it. That's how he knows. Just like when we're having those hard times and somebody's going through the same thing we're going through, they have the experience. So when they're giving advice, we'll more listen to them than one that hasn't went through it. And then the second part, the last portion of verse 17, and to know madness and folly. Madness and folly. He said, I want to know madness and folly. I want to know wisdom and insanity. Insanity. Remember the point. He wants to know apart from God, is there any purpose to life? The point is to recognize any purpose under the sun as man sees it, not God, as man sees it. In other words, can I look at the fool and say, he's the smartest guy on the planet? Is that true? Or is it the wise man that's the smartest man on the planet? Is it the one that's insane? Is he better off than all of us? I want to understand these things. I want to know. That's Solomon from a man's standpoint apart from God. And there again, remember, the way he knows is he has experienced it. I perceive that this also is but striving after the wind. That's what he says in the latter part of verse 17. There again, that's where that phrase comes in. This is also a dog chasing its tail. He's just running in circles. And that's what he knows based on experience. Verse 18, for in much wisdom is much vexation. This is going to be a good one. And he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. So let's look at, for in much wisdom is much vexation. First, before we look at that, you can tell that the gift that he has from God for wisdom is also became a burden to him. And vexation is defined as being bewildered, confused, and grieved all at the same time. Solomon's saying that is what wisdom is, because you understand so much. He also says wisdom increases sorrow. If you see that latter part of the verse, it increases knowledge and increases sorrow. Now, how does that happen? Why would you have sorrow if you knew more about things? Well, if you don't believe that, get on the internet when you have a pain and put all your symptoms in there, and by the time you get through with all that, you think you're going to be dying today. That's where that comes in. Or you get bombarded with all this knowledge. Here's my symptoms. Here's what the problem is. Oh gosh, I'm not going to make it. I got to plan my funeral. That is what he's saying. With all knowledge comes sorrow, but you are in control of that. You are the one who creates that sorrow when you start doing those kind of things. And if we follow, here's what I'm going to conclude with, because that was my last page. Y'all are saying, thank goodness. Here's what we know in chapter 1 of Ecclesiastes. All is vanity, all is emptiness apart from Jesus Christ. That's a no-brainer, but yet we will still go down some of those wrong paths in order to experience it before we actually stop and realize, hey, dummy, it's time to turn around and go the other way and get away from this, because it's not going to make you happy. It's not going to fulfill your heart. In the end, you're going to be empty apart from knowing Jesus Christ. That's the only thing that fills your heart. That's the only thing that can. Have you ever been in a situation where everything's going wrong, but because of your faith, you have peace of what's going on around you? That is such a great thing to have, because we rely on our Lord and Savior. I know when I'm having chaos, and I'm speaking from experience, as I know you know it as well, that Christ gives me that peace no matter what's going on around me. And it's a great thing to have in your life. And I feel somewhat for the ones who don't know Him, because they don't know what they're missing. And no matter what they're doing in life, and let me put this in there as well. I'm not saying you don't set goals and go after things in life. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying you don't strive to make more money. You don't strive to do whatever you want in your job to be successful. Whatever those endeavors are, what I'm saying is, and what Solomon is saying is, when it's apart from God, then it's going to be empty when you get to the end. That's what he's saying. Well, let's end in prayer. Lord, we thank you for another day. We thank you for Solomon doing the experiment so that we can learn from him and through your word that in the end all is vanity and all is empty without having you in our lives. We thank you for everything that you do for us, to the smallest thing, to the biggest thing, to past, to present, and the future. And we ask that you help us to stay on the right path, and to also maybe point it out to us at times when we start veering off, so that we can continue the way we should be going. And we thank you for your love, and we thank you for your grace. And all these things we ask in your name. Amen.